3 days had passed since the Bailey family's joy turned to terror. Portland's early winter mornings were usually calm, the damp air brightened by street lamps glinting off rain-slicked pavement. But for Connor Bailey, every sunrise brought a fresh wave of dread. Ever since his dog Milo's frantic barking had led him to the unthinkable discovery an infant left in a trash can on the sidewalk between Connor's house and his neighbor Joshua's world had tilted off its axis. Milo, the lively Jack Russell, had never behaved like this before. Usually, after their crack-of-dawn walk, he bounded straight into the yard to dig holes or chase fallen leaves. But that morning, Milo had strained at his leash, snarled, and barked at the boundary wall. At first, Connor had shrugged it off. Maybe Joe's cat was perched on the wall again, he'd thought. But when the barking escalated into panicked howls, Connor grabbed a flashlight and followed Milo's gaze. The sight that met him stopped his heart. A large plastic bin, its lid carelessly askew, sat on the pavement. Milo leapt over the low wall and pawed frantically at the lid. When Connor lifted it, the stench of rotting garbage hit him, and beneath the film of decay, he saw the small, pale face of an infant girl, swaddled in a thin blanket, her chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. Connor scooped her up with trembling arms, muffling his own gasp, and called 911. The police arrived within minutes, sirens slicing through the pre-dawn quiet, their blue lights flickering across damp lawn. Connor wrapped the baby in his own coat and held her close, talking softly while officers cordoned off the scene and paramedics checked her over. She was cold, covered in grime, but a living, unspoken miracle. When Connor gave his statement, his voice cracked. "I don't know how long she'd been there," he said. "Milo wouldn't stop. Something told me to look." The officers exchanged solemn nods. They praised Milo's instincts and assured Connor that he'd done the right thing by calling them immediately. Word spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. By morning, a small cluster of onlookers had gathered behind police tape, staring in horror at the spot where the baby had been abandoned. The Bailey's quiet street, the kind where children rode bicycles under oak trees and neighbors waved from porches, felt fractured. People whispered theories. Who could do this? Why abandon a newborn? The baby was rushed to the hospital, where doctors swaddled her in warm blankets and ran tests. Connor drove home alone, the early rain tapping at his windshield as he replayed the moment over and over in his mind. Later that afternoon, the police knocked on his door with news. The infant was healthy, and they'd given her a name for their reports, Baby Girl Doe, until her identity could be established. Connor's relief was fragile. He slept little over the next days, plagued by nightmares of what might have happened if Milo had missed the trash can. Each time his phone buzzed updates on the investigation, social media posts urging the public for Tipshy's heart raced. He found himself staring at Joe's front windows across the street, wondering what secrets his neighbor hid behind a polite smile. Meanwhile, detectives canvassed the area. They scoured forensic evidence, fingerprints on the trash bin, fibers from the blanket, footprints in the soft earth by the wall. They went door to door, asking residents if they'd seen a suspicious figure lugging a bin or carrying a bundled infant. Few had noticed anything, but one neighbor remembered hearing a muffled cry at 2:30 in the morning. Another saw a dark sedan parked briefly a week, unusual for the sleepy cul-de-sac. On the third day, Connor sat at his kitchen table, Milo curled at his feet, when a knock sounded at the door. He opened it to find a woman standing on the threshold, coat pulled tight against the chill, eyes rimmed with red. "Are you Mr. Bailey?" she asked. "I'm Jane Thomas. I'm the baby's mother." Connor recognized her from a neighborhood flyer circulating online, a picture of a distraught young mother holding a photo of her newborn, pleading for help. "Please," she whispered, voice barely louder than the wind, "can you tell me? Is she okay? I just want to see her." His breath caught. He invited her inside, led her to the couch, and sat beside her. "She's safe," he said. "Doctors say she's fine. They've been caring for her." Jane's shoulders sagged, and she pressed her fingers to her lips. Tears began to roll down her cheeks. She had been asleep when someone entered her house in the dead of night. She awoke to find her crib empty and her world shattered. Detectives arrived soon after, gently leading Jane away to make an official identification. Connor waited in the front room, heart thrumming, as he overheard snippets, her confirmation, her whispered sobs, the detectives' assurances they would catch whoever had done this. That afternoon, the community rallied. Neighbors brought hot meals to the Bailey house. A local church organized a vigil at dusk, lighting candles in the street. Connor stood alongside Jane, each holding a candle, as the glow reflected in their tears. He thought of what Milo had done scrambling over the wall, pawing at the bin to demand Connor's attention. That little dog had saved a life. In the days that followed, the investigation turned toward Joe, the neighbor whose garden backed up to the spot. Joe and his young family had always seemed polite. He'd waved whenever Connor mowed his lawn, had picked up packages for them while they were on vacation. But detectives noticed inconsistencies in Joe's statements. His timeline for when he'd disposed his own trash didn't match the bin's collection schedule. His gloves, found discarded behind his garage, bore traces of the same fabric lining on the blanket wrapped around Jane's infant. Footprints that matched Joe's boots were discovered in the soft soil beside the bin. Under questioning, Joe cracked. The truth spilled out in haggard, tearful admissions. He had faced a sudden financial crisis, his wife's medical bills, mounting credit card debt, foreclosure notices. Desperation had clouded his judgment. One night, he'd watched Jane's husband leave for work before dawn, seen the empty driveway, and made a ruthless plan: kidnap her baby, stash her in the trash can, and demand a ransom from Jane's family. But panic had gripped him the moment he heard the baby's muffled cries. He'd panicked, thrown her in the bin without any plan to retrieve her. Then he'd disposed of the blanket, hoping someone else would remove evidence before dawn. Connor listened through two-way glass as Joe's confession was recorded. The neighbor Connor had trusted, the one he'd waved to every morning, turned out a frightened criminal who nearly left a baby to die of exposure. Connor felt his stomach turn. How easily the familiar can become monstrous. Joe was arrested, his family reeling in shame. Jane's baby was returned that night, cradled in Jane's arms under the watchful eyes of detectivists. They named her Lily, the light that had survived the darkness. Connor watched mother and daughter leave the hospital together, Chloe's small form tucked against her mother's heart. He felt tears in his own eyes, then bent to scoop Milo into his arms, whispering, "Good boy, buddy." The legal process moved swiftly. Joe's prosecution was aided by forensic evidence and his own taped confession. A judge sentenced him to years in prison for child endangerment and attempted extortion. His family, broken and bewildered, moved away. The modest house across from Connor's sold soon after, its windows dark. In the weeks that followed, the community struggled to heal. Parents installed security cameras. Streetlights stayed on later. Block parties returned grilled hot dogs, laughter echoing under starlit skies. But a shadow hung over the cul-de-sac, a reminder of how close innocence had come to tragedy. Connor, too, carried scars. He replayed the images of the waste bin and the tiny face emerging from the trash. At nights, he'd wake, heart-pounding, convinced he'd missed a cue, that Milo's barking had gone unheard. Counseling helped. He joined a support group for bystanders of trauma. Sharing his story became part of the healing, each retelling taking a small piece of the raw edge away. Through it all, Milo remained at his side, alert, insistent, a tiny hero in fur and whiskers. Connor never missed their morning walks again, but this time he greeted the boundary wall with careful curiosity. When Milo barked, he looked. Milo's actions had saved a life. Now Connor honored his companion's instincts by paying attention to every little sign. On the anniversary of Lily's rescue, Connor joined Jane, Lily's godmother, and a handful of neighbors in the park. They placed a small plaque beneath an oak tree reading, "In honor of Lily, our community's light," and Milo, guardian of the vulnerable. A circle of children sat on the grass, tossing petals into the breeze. Jane, holding Lily, smiled at Connor. "He saved her," she whispered. Connor nodded, squeezing Milo's leash. The wind stirred, carrying petals over the lawn, as if scattering hope across the green. Life moved forward. Lily grew into a healthy toddler, her laughter a reminder of resilience. Joe's name faded into court records and newspaper archives, a cautionary tale. The neighborhood found new rhythms: Halloween pumpkins on porches, lemonade stands in summer, holiday wreaths on doors. But at each gathering, someone would recall that winter, and neighbors would look at Milo with gratitude. Connor learned a lesson in vigilance and compassion. A single moment of listening to a dog, to a stranger's question, could save a life. He became an advocate for pet-assisted search, volunteering with local shelters to train dogs to detect human distress. Milo, in his retirement years, sat beside him in training sessions, the original hero inspiring a new generation. Portland's rain returned, gentle as ever. Connor watched again as droplets slid down his window pane. He thought of the morning Milo had saved Lily, a reminder that even in the darkest places, light finds its way through. And so the dog walker, the rescued baby, and the fractured community grew stronger, bound by the simple truth that sometimes heroes wear fur and bark at the right moment. In the balance between ordinary routines and extraordinary courage, they found their shared story of hope,